Have you seen any starter homes for sale lately? Neither have I. Hello, and welcome to the Who Killed the Starter Home podcast. My name is Marina Rabina. I'm an architect and developer in New Jersey, working to bring starter homes back from the brink of extinction. On this podcast, we usually focus on housing policy, but we're taking some time to host special conversations with candidates running for New Jersey's 12th Congressional District. While our listeners outside of New Jersey may not care about this specific election, they may be fascinated to hear that we have 17 courageous people putting themselves in the spotlight and offering their vision and ideas for the future of their country. Housing issues are inevitably coming up, so we aren't straying too far from topic. Our guest today is Elijah Dixon. A lot of people get disappointed in politics. Elijah did too. But having lived the consequences of failed policies, he shifted from frustration to action, working to inspire and build better outcomes on the ground in our capital city of Trenton. He's not just someone who talks, he's someone who does. That approach has earned him real respect and influence in his community. This conversation is about building economic power, being bold enough to move past safe talking points, and focusing on how projects actually get done, how communities grow stronger, how real progress happens on the ground in New Jersey and beyond. Please note that the views expressed by the candidate are his own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this podcast. Given the nature of these long-form interviews, we cannot independently fact-check every claim made during the conversation. We encourage listeners to research the candidates and issues as we approach the primary. We would like to hear what you think, or if you have any ideas for how to bring the starter homes back from the brink of extinction, send us a note at starterhomepodcast@gmail.com. Great. Elijah, welcome to our podcast. I'm so grateful and excited to have you here, and especially as a candidate for Congress. This is, I guess I'm going to have to disclose this, that we have actually worked on projects together in Trenton, and we first met many years ago that I heard you speak at a community event, and I was blown away at how you provided inspiration for the entire group, because we were talking about revitalization of a portion of the city that was forgotten and abandoned. And after meeting you at that event, and this was during COVID and this was on Zoom, I thought, I need to meet this person again in real life. And I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity. But now you're running for Congress. So for those who have not met you in person yet, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what made you decide to take this brave step.
Sure. Well, and just first things first, thank you for the opportunity. I think it's very unique and invaluable that you're providing folks like me and other candidates a platform to be able to reach, local, regional, national audience, whoever's ears this may find. So thank you again. And I'm not sure where to start. I mean, you obviously mentioned the projects, but many people don't know. My life encompasses so much more than just the real estate development, and so I'm glad that I get to be able to expand past that limited vignette on platforms like this. So yes. Elijah Dixon, candidate for New Jersey's 12th Congressional District, seeking to fill the seat in the big shoes that our current Congresswoman, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, will be vacating in November. Beyond anything else, I think, and I'll talk about my background and what I do professionally, personally, but just my motivations for entering into the race, essentially. I'm a father, family man, community person, and my entire life has been defined and by and of people who have limited experience of like folks from my socioeconomic background and status. These decisions are made top down, and we are made to live with it. And people look at me and say, Elijah, why not council or state legislature or something? You don't have the political experience. But my entire life as an African American male here in this country has been nothing short of a political experience. We have redlining that disproportionately impacts, and I'm sure that we can even talk about this within the broader context of who killed the starter home. But we have structural inequities that are fueled and driven by policy and policymakers who have limited experience of those who they are casting a net on through their policies. And so, who better than to run for a seat and to represent the interests of a multicultural, multi-generational district than those who know firsthand the impacts and the disproportionate impacts that bad policy has. So that's one, and that's a bit of my motivation. Aside from the fact that we know we have an executive branch that is increasingly inching or shoving our country into this increasingly authoritarian state, but perhaps more on that later. A bit about me. I began my professional career as an organizer, community organizer, organizing around cooperative economic initiatives, projects, pooling our resources, our economic capital, social and political capital for systemic changes at a local level. I found recognition and notoriety here within the city of Trenton around 2015 or 16 when Obama had launched the My Brother's Keeper initiative, and I was chosen to be an ambassador for the city of Trenton for MBK, as it's come to be known. And in that position, I was able to get more deeply entrenched within local politics and begun to understand all of these people who mean well and at times, of course, do well, but the ideals that were purported somehow eluded the reality that had materialized. And for me, I became disillusioned with the political economy and with politics in general. And many people within my generation just came to see, oh, this is just another plan. This is just another voice who's saying one thing, but then behind closed doors are doing others. And so I left the organizing space for a bit and started working. I was working for a local nonprofit organization doing community outreach, at which point I came to more intimately understand and know about the plans for revitalization in the downtown area. And at the time, I believe I was a realtor. I got my realtor's license. Never once bought or sold a home on behalf of anybody else, but I had my realtor's license for a period of time, and that afforded me access to the MLS, which is the tool that realtors use to, find properties on the market. And I came across a property within the area that I knew was about to be revitalized. And so I was able to see opportunity here within our neighborhood, within our community before many others were able to. And so that's how I really got my start in like the economic development, the property side of things. And then just in our city, not many people who look like me have been able to take that step, especially at that young age. Perhaps I was 22, 23 years old and working to buy a property, mixed use property. And granted, it's in like what others would consider the hood, but it was still a major step. And so then that got the respect of my peers, because now I'm not just someone who talks, I'm someone who does. And then with that project, which is now known as the Orchid House, the property is now known as the Orchid House, came social capital. And I was able to then leverage that social capital to then get respect and influence within other spheres and other arenas, other sectors outside of real estate here within the city. So now I'm not, so I came from an organizer to then someone who understands community development finance, to then someone who now is able to speak more intimately to the restrictive policies that suppress or inhibit our ability to grow here. So that's how I got into the community development space. And then now, very briefly, I work for a national community development financial institution where I direct economic development activities across the state of New Jersey in cities. So like Trenton, I'm actually based out of Newark. So Newark, Trenton, Irvington, East Orange, all across the state, creating and directing programs that are meant to reduce income inequality among the have and have-nots, essentially. So that's a bit about me.
Well, and we're going to notice that you are located right now in the Orchid Cafe, right?
I am located in the Orchid Cafe, and if I could, I would pan the camera. We're currently, under reconstruction, seeking to, we're actively working to, and I'm the general contractor here, to build like 600 square foot addition onto the back of the building, a huge solarium. It would be like you're like walking into and eating within the Garden of Eden, hanging orchids, vine plants. It's going to be amazing. It's like something that's a regional attraction. Of course, I'm biased because cause this is my baby. I'm trying to see it through, but that's the goal here. Yeah.
But I think what's really important, and I think you touched upon it in your introduction, is that your strategy is doing things, right? You have been actively, and it's not easy, but you were able to acquire property, use your understanding of financing, economic development, and bring actual results. And I find that bringing that experience to politics hopefully is what we're going for, right? And
No, absolutely.
and how difficult it is to get things done, right? And I had friends visiting from London, and I brought them to the Orchid Cafe.
Oh, that's right. Oh my gosh, that's right. That's
I
right. That's
remember,
right. Yes.
and this is an example of how an incredible, beautiful city like Trenton has people like yourself who are able to deliver. When Starbucks leaves,
Yeah.
but Orchid House is flourishing, right? That's what we're trying to explain here, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, but now jumping to you in Congress, do you have specific kind of areas of focus that you want to be sort of, Elijah is focusing on, these particular areas?
Economic justice. So my priority would be to, and I want to just preface what I'm about to say with the fact that there's 435 members of the House of Representatives. And right now, given the current political landscape, the current political climate, to get anything passed, whether you're a seasoned legislator or you are a fledgling, as I'm aspiring to be, it's going to be difficult, because right now, who knows what the landscape will look like in 2026. But then, of course, you have the veto power bestowed upon the executive branch, and so perhaps we will not see types of policy changes that I'm going to share with you right now until 2028 at the earliest, right? But so when I say economic justice, I mean policies that are meant to increase our earning power. So there's an affordability crisis right now, and we can debate about the cost of things, but the more deeply entrenched iniquity here is that our wages and our earning power proportionate to the disproportionate rise in the cost of goods and services it's not kept at pace. And so that's why there's an affordability crisis right now, because wages have just not been increasing proportionate to the cost of living. And so the policies that I would seek to introduce, and this is of course outside of, and we could talk about the Medicare for all, the first introduction of a public option for health care, and things that would keep more money in our pockets. So like that's the defense, right? But just like as far as offense is, and it's like proactive policies that are meant to actually increase our wages that we can then save through policies like Medicare for all is going to be critical. So we need to address our earning power right now and ensure that basic wages, so basic living wages are brought up to standard of what they should be, which is really $20 an hour or more. In today's day and age, people are. New Jersey was hailed for this $15 an hour minimum wage. That's just the beginning. I mean, and that was years ago, and it was a laddered effect. So we just now reached the $15 mark. We nationally need like a $20 an hour minimum wage, but. So economic justice, economic rights, that'll be my focus and my priority. And of course, some of the more like North Star policies, such as Medicare for all, and granted, or the ability to choose a public option for healthcare, just for starters, which is what Obama tried to introduce back in 2008, and was effectively had that provision of the Affordable Care Act killed by two Democratic senators, and he had a Democratic Senate, Democratic House of Representatives, and then you had the president, obviously, was a Democrat, and it was our own party that had effectively killed off the public option. So there's so much work to be done. It's not just because we have a Republican, a Republican-controlled House and Senate and executive branch. So the policies that I seek to create is going to be rooted in reducing the structural barriers that prevent people from earning more and keeping more of the resources. But just very quickly, and what I believe that we could do and will do as a Congress member is there's a process called the Congressional Congressional Directed Spending, or CDS, and or otherwise known as earmarks. And so Congress members, they're afforded a certain amount of resources that they can then redirect back into their communities, to nonprofits, public infrastructure projects through what's called the CDS, or Congressionally Directed Spending initiatives. And so that's what I would do to be able to materially benefit folks in the near term, even without having to pass a single piece of legislation. Finding and identifying the organizations on the ground right now who are doing the good work, we can then direct essentially millions of dollars back into the district to these organizations for the work that they're doing to advance our shared causes and shared dreams. That's my goal.
Excellent. So if you were to direct these funds, hopefully, fingers crossed, to our local district and your hometown of Trenton, what priorities would it be? Transportation? Would it be for example, I'm super curious what your thoughts are on the tunnel. And it seems like Trenton is an amazing location. It has a train station that in an hour you can be in New York, and it's incredibly underutilized, possibly because of our struggling infrastructure.
So and I want to just preface, the amount of resources, perhaps, $10 to $20 million that I would be able to, a year that I'll be able to direct into the district through the earmark process would be not inconsequential, but it would dwarf the amount of, or it would just be a small amount of the total bucket that would be needed to be able to materially improve the conditions of our public infrastructure, specifically like NJ Transit. Now, granted, the tracks are owned by Amtrak. That is a federal entity. And so, public infrastructure is definitely important, critical. I take the train weekly up to Newark. I've sat there for 3 hours in the train station, on a hot train because suddenly something is malfunctioning. We can't move. We're missing birthdays. We're missing this and that. So I know firsthand just how struggling our public infrastructure and public transit system is, comparatively speaking to other so-called Western nations or industrialized nations like Japan and even places over in Europe, where it's mind-boggling. But to the first part of your question about where I would seek to direct these resources and just what types of initiatives, and I'm glad you asked that, because I've spoke about the CDS and the earmark process to a couple of people before, and no one's actually asked, so how I would use them. And this is going to just briefly touch on, and I hope I'm not preempting the topic here, but shared equity models. So like land trusts, cooperatives, so other types of like nonprofit or like not-for-profit shared equity economic entities and models that would be able to subsidize the cost of living where people need it most, their housing. So you have models all across the country. So especially right across Hudson, over in New York City, over in California, where you have these real estate cooperatives and you have land trusts. And so the land trust would essentially, and it's a nonprofit entity, the land trust would own the land and can receive grants and other types of subsidy directly, and then could either sell or rent out the improvements, so like the physical infrastructure, like the buildings on top of it, and that is a way to be able to cut back on costs and increase and engender permanent affordability, because you can do like a 99-year ground lease. And but with all of this, you have to have the support of the municipality. However, in places like Trenton, I know that there's support, but also there's just people aren't doing these things here in Trenton and even in Princeton. And so we have to first even show people what's possible. And that's also why our campaign and our movement is grounded in this mantra called Dream Forward, because like we know that better is possible. We know it's possible. It's just that we have not seen it. No one's talking about it. And so then we just continue on in this state. But like if we're dreaming with open eyes and we're able to see and understand best practices, best results of what's taking place in other places and what's working, then we can then with open eyes as well, move to materialize that better world. And so we know it's possible. We have to just be bold and take decisive, intentional steps to see it through.
I preaching to the choir. I'm convinced, but I think this is going back to the point where it's allowing yourself to dream and seeing that this is possible and we can be doing it. Other people are doing it. We can be doing it too. And bringing affordability and wealth creation, and housing is such a major portion of everybody's income that if we start our work there, that hopefully that will help with all the other issues, right? So I would love to hear of that dreams and inspirations in other areas. If do they extend to other arenas that when you are in Congress representing our district as sort of a countrywide, is there a dream or vision for how do you see us on sort of federal issues?
Sure. So my key things, and this is detailed to a degree on my website, but just energy infrastructure. So like our public grid and people. So just like getting back to the issues that people most immediately feel. So every month you have a mortgage bill or a rent bill. Every month, utility bill. People are looking at PSC, and so here within our region we have PSC&G. There's 3 or 4 utility companies that essentially effectively have what's called a natural monopoly here within New Jersey. I'm not going to get into this into the specifics of how and why it's a natural monopoly, but everyone understands that we have a select few utility companies who are essentially managing our the service provision and delivery of energy here, utilities, gas, electric, etc. What people do not understand is that there is a corporation, a nonprofit corporation called PJM, which is the grid operator. So for 13 different states across the region, you have this centralized entity called PJM that decides who gets approved in terms of, so what project get approved in terms of new power plants, as they're called. And so a power plant, so like whether that's a coal mine, God forbid, or it is like an offshore wind, a community solar project, this entity called PJM, there are hundreds of new, so just really quickly, supply and demand. our prices keep going up here as far as utilities go because there's increasing demand, more people being born, more people moving into the state, getting apartments growing up, so people, population is growing, so increased demand. But on the supply side, there's a disproportionate amount of power plants being approved by the grid operator PJM to be able to allow for more power to be generated. And so when you have a restricted supply and you have increased demand, low supply, high demand, prices skyrocket. They just continuously increase. And so that's something that's like a little known entity really that effectively is responsible for the bidding and the setting of future energy prices based on what they believe the demand is going to be. But of course, if you're also responsible for approving the new supply, and by the way, who are the board of directors on PJM? Major utility companies, like institutional investors of energy. So you have like the fox in charge of the hen house here, and then you have on the executive branch you have folks like Trump saying, yeah, we're going to ban these five major energy infrastructure projects due to national security reasons. But of course his son Jared Kushner, his equity venture partnership with Saudi Arabia just got a $2 billion investment, of course, for oil. So you see like the juxtaposition between policymakers and the various branches of government, and then on like the consumer side where there's that disconnect. So there needs to be greater accountability and this is something that I would have, and it's not even necessarily a policy that would be introduced, but as a federal representative, you have oversight over federal agencies, and you can serve as a liaison, and there's investigatory powers there that can be initiated to understand what the bottlenecks are for the supply, not meeting the demand, and then we can start with there. I'm not going to necessarily take an accusatory tone, but it's very interesting that many of the same entities who are on this board of the grid operator and who are deeply invested in the fossil fuel industry are some of the same ones who are responsible for running the grid and approving new clean energy projects. So that right there, energy infrastructure, is going to be key, and just facilitating oversight over from soup to nuts, from the generation of the power to the delivery, and making sure that there's accountability on all ends, so that the consumers, us, the residents in the constituency, are not being overly burdened by systemic inequities that exist. So energy, housing, I've touched on healthcare, and on the progressive side, now I'm very left. I mean, I'm not going to say far left, but I'm very left of center. I'd say that. And so I am a proponent of Medicare for all. I mean, I've been to places that are much more economically, it's like, who are what we would consider developing nations, let's say, right? And their healthcare system, and like the quality of healthcare, the cost of healthcare, if there's a cost at all, it's just amazing. And we are here in what's widely considered the greatest nation on earth, the most wealthiest, most prosperous nation on earth, and we do not have a national healthcare system. And so I would start there. But before we can have something like Medicare for all, we're going to have to first introduce what's considered a public option into healthcare. And so you would have, so right now, Medicare and Medicaid, are, of course, like the income restricted program. So removing those income barriers, and so allowing any and everyone, if they would like to have their healthcare policy be a government run program like Medicare or Medicaid, that they have that option to do so. And what that is going to do is that's going to dramatically increase the competition against the dominating and domineering corporate private insurance companies, and that's going to bring down our costs. And so then once people see the viability in a public option, then, I mean, years down the line, we're going to have a case can be made for Medicare for all. I mean, the case exists now, but like the practical, or as they say in research, the empirical, like research will be there. Like the proof is in the pudding. People's costs down, the quality of care is increased. So healthcare is a major thing, but I want to just be not tell people a dream and say, yeah, I'm gonna vote for me, get me into Congress. We're gonna have Medicare for all. It doesn't work like that. We have the most right wing government in the history of our nation. To be able to even think that we're gonna get something like that passed, until 2028 at the earliest is, you know, it shouldn't even be considered. So we have to think about how we can, again, leverage like the earmarks and our investigatory powers as a house, rather as a member of the House, so that we can still have an immediate impact in our district and just be present, be seen, be felt.
It's so interesting to hear you describe all of these options. So the way I always thought about, and see what you think about this idea, the healthcare conundrum is that to me, healthcare is very much related to economic development. That if a person does not feel safe leaving their job to start our own business or try to do something entrepreneurial because they're stuck in a dead-end situation because that's the whole family's healthcare provider, that limits innovation, that limits opportunities. And it seems to me, maybe this is wrong thinking, that if there was an option, a public option, that would just create a safety net for somebody like yourself who is entrepreneurial and looking for trying something new and having not having to just keep a job that you don't love and kind of maintain that just to make sure your family has backup health care, right? I have definitely come across people who say, no, I can't start my own business. In my family, I'm the person with the health insurance.
No, and I've actually, and kudos to you, because I've never heard like an argument, like just a case made in that way, and that makes so much sense. And I think that is taking a very like real concern for people and just humanizing it, because that's something that even growing up, even in my household, that we that was our dilemma here. It's like my mom was we had health care through her until we were 26, and at the time I don't want to say she hated her job, but she contemplated leaving her job more often than others did, and she did not, because she was concerned about our healthcare situation. And it wasn't until I was in a position to get a professional job that offered healthcare that I was covered, and now I have a daughter and she's covered, and so I feel you, like that's an amazing case to be made there.
Right. Providing opportunities for people as we move towards more, digital economy and things that people are going to be doing for themselves. And, we hear a lot about large companies laying off people. These people could be starting their own businesses, but it's such an American thing to do, in my opinion, right? To have a small business, to try something new, to experiment, and having that safety net would be really helpful, in my opinion.
No, I agree.
Okay, well, another, and you sort of getting to larger issues facing your country. Do you have any thoughts on immigration?
I do, but
Living in Trenton,
that's such a broad
such a,
topic.
a
So what about
community
immigration?
full of immigrants. So if we don't want to go there, but if you have any thoughts on
Well,
how
no,
would you fix this problem?
I do have thoughts on immigration, and I want to just say that and I can speak to, I guess, the hot button part of it right now, which is the weaponization of ICE to effectively, and it's lost its mandate, and they say in the news that they're going after the worst of the worst, and the rapists and the assaulters, the murderers, and that's just not what we're seeing here. So people are saying abolish ICE, abolish. Sure, I'm for abolishing ICE. I'm actually in favor of just dismantling the Department of Homeland Security. We didn't have it until post 9/11. However, that is not going to solve what we're seeing here going on today. It's not. And in fact, if these agencies and institutions were dismantled and abolished, Trump and his cronies would then just institutionalize the powers of ICE and DHS into other agencies that still exist today. God forbid it be the FBI or the NSA. That's the National Security Agency. I mean, so there's a whole host of other federal agencies that, if ICE was abolished and DHS was abolished, that those same powers would then just be bestowed upon other entities that they're not going to dismantle, and there would be bipartisan support to keep it. And actually, in fact, right now there's bipartisan support to keep ICE. Um, you know, Not for me. I'm of the mindset that it needs to go, but just to the broader problem, because Americans want in safe and secure borders, and I wholeheartedly understand that. But we have to look at the structural drivers of immigration, and I can take it back as far as like NAFTA. Growing up in school, you learn about NAFTA in economics class, and that's the North American Free Trade Agreement, right? And that allowed for free trade between Canada, U.S., and Mexico. But what it also did was it inserted price controls on certain staple crops in places like Mexico, so that they could not outcompete U.S. And so then what that did was, if maize and corn was the primary crop of a region in Mexico, and now all of a sudden you have these policies that are saying, well, you can only sell your corn for this amount, and that is how your family has been making a living, and there's nothing but it's nothing but farmland there and fertile land. Like, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? If your industry and economy has been built around agriculture, and so you're going to migrate, where are you going to migrate to? The U.S. And so there's policy decisions that have the unintended consequence of disrupting other nations' economies, that then drive them to want to leave their country and put themselves in harm's way to get to the U.S. We have to first look at those issues and the U.S.'s role in destabilizing other nations' economies. Just being like quite honest with you, and that's a conversation that's it's not sexy to have, but and it's most often done in the name of multinational corporations like Dole and like Chiquita, and these other entities that effectively control lobbying and lobbyists that then control our elected officials. And then we have policies that are created that then afford and create the market conditions for these international conglomerates to have even more market share and even more resources and capital. And those resources are not flowing down to the everyday citizen, here in the U.S. They're flowing down to the stakeholders and shareholders of these corporations and to their investors. So we have to look at all of those concerns. I do not believe that we're going to make ourselves safer by, finishing this massive border wall that Trump is, so they had said, right, in a recent PCDO candidate questionnaire that was circulated, there was reference that Trump had effectively halted illegal immigration. That's not true. When people are stuck between a rock and a hard place, they're going to find a way over. People are still coming over. Has he decreased it? Yes. Has he effectively stopped it? No. And it's going to continue on until we look at those structural drivers of immigration. But I mean, I want to just if this is not made clear enough, I do not condone or welcome the weaponization of ICE, and certainly how it's been used and operationalized in our communities. Picking up fathers after they're dropping off their kids to school. So imagine, like, you're a kid. I have a 4-year-old. I actually, so right before I came, and sat down for this podcast, I took her to school around the corner. I'm just imagining, her coming out of that school and just thinking, or rather, not even coming out, just waiting there at the school for him to pick her up, and I never show up. You have no clue what happens to your father. That's happening right now. That is insane, and there needs to be checks and balances and accountability. Once all this is said and done, there needs to be accountability on the people who have allowed for the proliferation of lawlessness, they just feel embodied, and they being like these agencies and institutions and the people who are leading them. And this is not what the American public, well, I guess that this is what they voted for, but this is not what they want, and this is not what we need. So something does need to be done. But first and foremost, there needs to be like these agencies, while they're still here and not abolished, they need to be put in check, full force. And it should not take for a young woman or a young man, defending the rights of their neighbors to be gunned down. It should not take people losing their lives for us to have a serious debate about right and wrong and how the law should be effectuated. So apologize for sure, but we need to do more to address the structural drivers.
Yeah, it's a very scary time we live in, right? And it's very you mentioning these terrific things that are going on in Minnesota, and do you feel that having that just happened has changed people's minds, especially in Congress? And do you think that now that may create an opportunity for things to move forward that could actually impact change? That things have gotten so bad that maybe there's a realization that we actually do need to start doing something to make things better, to actually pass immigration reform?
I think that there is that realization for sure, but people are so afraid of Trump on the right. I'm going to believe I have to believe that there are people who are Republicans who do not condone and welcome what is going on right now. But anytime they see that anytime that someone opens up their mouth and votes with their morals for what's right, Trump says you're going to pay for that come time the midterms, and then he empowers and cultivates a challenger to then challenge them and says that's not a real Republican, and then his base and then the media then double down, and so they're afraid. And but you should never be like, and this is perhaps why term limits are needed, and that's a whole other discussion, but you should never be worried about your job security in your role in Congress being at risk. Like that should not be an impediment to you making the right decision. So I think that what we're getting right now on both sides of the aisle is lip service. Actually, in fact, there was a very prominent Republican whose name I'm forgetting right now, but he actually came out and said, no, Kristi Noem has to go. It's time. She's just inexperienced. She doesn't have a good handle on things. The American public are upset and afraid. But I'll tell you what, and I'm saying lip service because, they're not going to vote. So this is Trump's America right now. At least that's how Trump's running it. And they're not going to vote in a way that is going against Trump's bidding because they are afraid come time midterms. And they should be afraid nonetheless because the American public is fed up with the shit, respectfully. They're fed up with it. And so there is going to be a tide that's coming. But are they going to lift a finger and go against Trump and the right wing of the party to vote in terms of immigration reform that is grounded in humanity while still affording protection to the borders? I don't think that they're going to do that, Marina. I wholeheartedly do not believe that that we're going to see immigration reform within the next couple of years, as long as Trump is there. I do not.
Oh, and I thought you were such an optimist.
Well, you know what? I'm an optimist. I'm an idealist. I know it's possible, but I'm also a realist. And I'm looking at whenever someone speaks up against Trump, So like, in fact, just recently, right? Just a couple of days ago, there were six Republicans who voted against mandating that folks have some form of picture ID when they go to vote. There were 6 Republicans who voted against that. And now, so granted, the bill still passed. So there was still enough of a majority in the House to be able to approve and passed the legislation. But you had 6 Republicans who voted against it. Trump said, "You guys are going to pay." Trump said, "You guys are going to pay," and language like that coming, like that vindictiveness coming out of the White House for something, for something like voter ID, for some of his more, for some of his more, like the word is escaping me, but the policies that he strongly feels about, from immigration to to even like the environment and clean energy and dismantling the EPA, the Department of Ed, and things of that nature. Like, if you go against things that he feels strongly convicted about, he's definitely going to weaponize his base against you, and then also weaponize the media against you. And so it is a scary time indeed. And we cannot be dismayed, because there are things that we can do. We cannot fight fascism with fascism. We have to fight it with solidarity and resilience, and supporting the people and the organizations on the ground, who are in spite of everything else still choosing to show up and put their best foot forward in support and defense of their dreams. And I think that that's how we have to approach this.
Well, that is an excellent, excellent optimistic note, I would say. I have one question that I'm wondering if you would be able to answer. I asked people around what do you want me to ask candidates? And I thought this was a really fun question, that there at this point like 17 or 18 candidates running for the seat. And one of the goals of our conversations today is to have people hear everybody for a longer time and get to know the person. But somebody's going to win. It's going to be one person out of 17 or 18. And obviously you believe you're the best candidate. But if you were to choose a second best, I thought this was such a brilliant question. Do you think you could pick a second best out of all the candidates? You've met them a little bit.
So I've met them, but I must profess, Marina, that I've been focused solely on my race. I have done some digging into just where other people stand on policies, so I can better understand the people who I am not debating with, but who I'm competing with. But I'm really focused on my race. I would say that. So I do. So look, there. No. So there are people who I support, right, and whose voices matter to me, and who I respect, who are in this race right now. But many of the candidates here, they represent relatively like cookie cutter Democrats. And I say that because they're regurgitating talking points from like the National Democratic Party on immigration, on healthcare, and the climate, and have no real sense. And you can hear it when they speak. They have no real sense of how these things even work, how to get them passed. They don't know. They don't know. And so, like, you mentioned obviously that I feel as though that I'll be the most appropriate, capable candidate. I mean, of course, I need to feel that way, or else, or else, like, why am I here? But I have like lived experience, securing and then operationalizing capital from federal agencies like HUD, like the EPA, the Department of Treasury. I understand how these things work. I understand how the legislation gets passed, and the quagmire that is Washington. We had a forum, the first forum, at least that I participated in, of the cycle, and I'm listening to some folks, and it's healthcare, Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, and but like how? And so there's much to. So before I answer that question, Marina, I would just need to hear folks more, and so perhaps I'll get more to the how as I tune more into your station and and into your podcast, so I can better understand people's positions on things, as opposed to just the talking points that they're regurgitating from the party.
Well, that even though it's not a,
I'm
not
sorry.
a direct answer.
I'm
That's
sorry.
fine, but that's a really good set of parameters as people look forward and choose their candidates, is to sort of, how do we get beyond the standard answers, and what what is it, that it's wonderful that, but I think you also mentioned it, as Democrats we pretty much have a consistent base. We know
Yeah.
where we're all coming from, and, but where, how,
The
right?
how, have to get to the how. And in politics, like you see, and so this is why like Zoran's case up in New York, was so profound, because he stuck to like three simple things, but he also had a way to achieve them. And there was doubt cast on his candidacy and on his platform. But then, within like the first 90 days, you now have government, you now have Governor Hochul saying, yeah, like we're gonna have universal child care. And so like she was able to help facilitate that. So I'm focused on the how right now, as opposed to just the what, and understanding the limitations and constrictions that the current political climate present for getting anything passed. But it's possible that we can have better. I know it's possible. That's why we're dreaming forward in our candidacy, in our campaign. And I do appreciate you, Marina, in just providing the platform for people like me, to be able to get our voices heard and get deeper onto the issues.
Well, thank you for running, and let's dream forward.
Ah, yes, that's right. Thank you, Marina.